In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to set up a raised ink file in InDesign CC for the HP Indigo 7900 press. This design only uses raised ink with CMYK, but it doesn't have any other specialty inks. Before we get started, I'm going to point out 4 important considerations that you need to think about before you start. First of all, if you're using raised ink on a dark substrate, many times your design is going to be shown to a client as a client proof, and usually it will have a layer simulating a dark color of paper so that the client can see how the design will look once it's printed. But in order to submit a press-ready file to TPSi, please delete or turn off this layer so that we aren't accidentally printing a base layer CMYK ink on an already colored paper. Second, in setting up your pages, be sure that you don't have multiple designs placed on each page. You need to have every single design on its own page properly sized to the dimensions of that design. If you're unsure how to set that up, please see our video on how to set up proper crops and bleeds and proofing your PDF files in InDesign CC 2017. Third is that raised ink cannot be used in a master page. The Indigo press is only set up to read raised ink in one layer. If raised ink is applied to a master page, the Indigo will see it as 2 layers and will not print in the master page layer. I know this is a hassle if you're designing multiple business cards for a company and you want to avoid having to copy and paste your raised ink elements into each card, but unfortunately that's what you're going to have to do in order to get the press to read your file correctly. And lastly, there is a maximum application for raised ink. Raised ink cannot be applied to any line or stroke thicker than 1 millimeter, which is 1/32 of an inch, or 0.0394. It also has a limit of 12 points for fonts. Now, if you need clear ink applied over a larger area, then please see our videos on how to apply clear varnish. Okay, so let's get started. In order to set up raised ink in InDesign, we're going to be using 3 basic panels, which are your Layers panel, your Swatches panel, and your Attributes panel. If any of these are not already visible, you can bring them up by simply going to the window in the menu bar and selecting whichever panels you need to appear. The Attributes panel is found under the Output section. Now, as you can see here, I already have this design showing the back of a bar menu for a sushi and sake bar using CMYK. Now, I want to apply raised ink over the top of all of the CMYK, and I also want to make sure that I have an area of bleed so that my CMYK and my raised ink extends off the page, so when it's trimmed, I don't have any sliver of white paper showing around the edges. So in order to set this up, let's go to the Layers panel and create a new layer and make sure that it's the top layer. We're going to name this Raised Ink. Now you need to type in raised ink exactly the way I have it here. This is case sensitive. If you spell it any other way, it won't work because this is the labeling that we've used to program our HP Indigo 7900. Now that we have the layer name, let's create a raised ink swatch. Go to your Swatches panel and click the drop-down menu in the upper right corner. Select New Swatch. Now when that panel comes up, go ahead and rename the color value in there to raised ink. Again, this is case sensitive and specific to the HP press. It needs to be spelled exactly the same way that you named your layer. Under color type, select spot, and under color mode, make sure that it's in CMYK. Now go to your sliders and create a color that you want to use for your raised ink. At TPSi, we generally use 100% cyan as our raised ink spot color, but you can use anything you like as long as it isn't 100% K, because that sometimes gets confusing for us in proofing your file. The press isn't really looking for the color of the swatch, it's looking for the swatch to be a spot color that's labeled raised ink. Now once you've got your color, click OK. You know that you have your raised ink swatch properly loaded if you see a black dot in the lower right hand corner of your swatch. I would also recommend deleting all the extra swatches except those that you've used in your design and your raised ink swatch. Now once you have your design all completed, make sure that you have all of your type converted to outlines. To do that, just select all of your text, go to Type, and select Create Outlines. Now, take your selection tool and select all the elements where you want to apply raised ink and group them together. Copy and paste these into the raised ink layer. Make sure that they line up exactly over your CMYK layer. Now with all of these elements selected, apply the raised ink swatch. Now go to the Attributes panel and select Overprint Fill. Now if your design has strokes, you'll also select the Overprint stroke unless it's grayed out. But if it's grayed out, don't worry about it and just select Overprint Fill. Now save your file as a native InDesign file. Next, you'll want to save your file as a PDF. At TPSi, we prefer having files submitted as PDFs. It's only if we have to troubleshoot your file will we need your native InDesign file. To save as a PDF, go to Export, and under Format, save as Adobe PDF. Now, in order to get the best color output on our HP Indigo 7900, we ask that you change the PDF settings. In this preset, instead of the default entry, open up the drop-down menu and select Press Quality. In the Standard drop-down menu, select PDF X4 2010. You'll notice in the Compatibility field it will automatically change to Acrobat 7, PDF 1.6 or higher. Under the Options setting, go ahead and select View PDF after exporting. And you can leave the other options selected or unselected based on your own preferences. Now we're going to move out of the general settings into the marks and bleeds settings. At TPSi for raised ink, only check the trim marks under the marks section. Don't use any of these other settings. Down here in the bleed and slug section, use document bleed settings if you have a bleed. Click the Save PDF and you should see your PDF open up. I'm using Adobe Acrobat DC. Even if you have an earlier version of Acrobat, you still have the same settings that we are getting ready to look at. Now we're going to proof your file to make sure it will print correctly. Once you have your PDF file open, you should see your trim marks and the designated bleed area if you have a bleed area. Once you've seen those are set correctly, go to Tools and look for Print Production. Open up that section and then look for Output Preview. You'll notice right away that a panel will open up, and the only thing I want you to pay attention to is the separation section at the bottom of the panel. You'll notice that it will show you all of the process plates as well as the spot plates. If you set up your file correctly, you should see a raised ink spot color listed under the spot plates. You'll also notice that it's at 0%. So you'll need to take your cursor and start moving it over the areas where you've applied raised ink, and you should see it register at 100%. Now, if all of this is reading correctly, then that's it. Your file is ready to send to us for printing.